Good morning, everybody. I love Sorcerer. I mean, I just made a Fire Sorcerer build guide for you guys, and I thought, why don't I change it up with a totally different type of Sorcerer? So today, I have a Fire Sorcerer build guide that is totally different because it's melee, which is not like the melee Sorcerer build that I did before, because I did do a melee Fire Sorcerer before that too, and this is like that. It's the improved version. You see, with the update that brought us the imbues came several changes, and one of those was how the Sorcerer and the Wizard Eldritch Knight was handled. You see, on a Sorcerer and a Wizard Eldritch Knight, you basically never wanted to multiclass, because by taking the capstone, it increased the base damage of your elemental damage on hit from a D10 to a D12, which is a lot of extra damage per individual dice. So the difference between going with 18 levels of Sorcerer versus 20 levels was hugely noticeable, especially because it was very difficult to actually get extra sources of dice from different places. However, what is very exciting is that since there's these imbue changes, you can get imbue dice everywhere. Rogue, Monk, Favorite Soul, Bard, Cleric, many different sources of epic destinies, many different items all over the place. You can get crazy amounts of imbue dice. So I thought to myself, how do I rework this build and keep all the cool stuff, all the damage, and get more damage and more stats? And that is what we have today. It's a Fire Sorcerer, 18 Sorcerer, 1 Favored Soul, 1 Monk. Basically, with this build, we're not taking the capstone of the Eldritch Knight tree, but instead, by having the 1 Sorcerer or Favored Soul and 1 Monk, we gain access to the Charisma Trance from Favored Soul, allowing me to get about an extra plus 23 to hit, damage, and tactics DC, which is very, very good, and a lot for one individual level of a class. And then the Monk grants access to 3 very important things. First, you get a bonus feat, and you get comma proficiency for free, basically saving me 2 feats on this build, which means we can use these 2 feats for other stuff, most specifically extra defensive tools because you're going to be in melee. 2, the Monk grants access to stances, and since we can use Ocean Stance with this build very effectively because you don't need strength, you can get a very high amount of dodge with this character, up into the 30s, which is very comfortable. And finally, out of the Henshin Mystic Tree is a very powerful ability that allows you to make it so monsters take 10% more damage from fire. And since the majority of your damage is fire with this build, it's a perfect match. As a result, my character is capable of making targets take 56% more fire damage. And that's not including what other people do with their debuffs. And it also means it applies to other players, so I can make it so monsters take huge amounts of extra fire. Now granted, other builds tend to be better nowadays, especially with cold being the big thing that everyone's playing, the hot ticket, if you will. However, fire is still useful, and there are a lot of people that are running around with fire damage, so being able to amp up that much fire damage is super duper good. On top of that, this character leveled like a dream, because I kind of just leveled it as a Fire Sorcerer and did some melee, but I didn't really do most of my melee until I got into epics. But once I did get into epics, I gained an incredible amount of damage. Now, there are a few things I still think I'm kind of on the fence about with this build, such as whether I want to use a deeper involvement in something like Grandmaster of Flowers versus what I'm currently using. I still think the Fatesinger route, which I'm currently going, is the way to go. I think it's super good for now with our current amount of epic destiny points, and maybe in the future, I would like to invest a lot more into the Grandmaster of Flowers tree, but for now, this character is very, very strong for both leveling and endgame with really, really solid damage. Now, the one downside of this build is that while everything else seems like a super huge win, dropping down to cloth armor from medium by having to take the monk requirements and the monk stance and everything else, that is a little bit rough. Unfortunately, you're not able to just avoid that and take the split here because you actually need key to use the fire vulnerability attack, which is really important for the build because the extra 10% damage stacks up very well. So you do have to get used to using cloth, which can be kind of annoying. On top of that, because of the requirement for cloth, it also makes it a little bit screwy when it comes to the gearing as well, because you have to make sure you're picking items that work with cloth. So for this build that I have here for you, I ended up using part of the family because it was just simpler to build around, although I'm sure there probably is a better item set that I just don't really have the patience to go farm out. So if you want something for endgame, it will be here. Now, it's important to note about this build, you can work it Everything about this build works really well. If you don't want to use a comma, you don't have to use them. You can use another weapon if you want, like a longsword if you want to take Whirling Steel Strike or other sources. However, the commas that you use on this build are because of the 2 commas from the Hunter Be Hunted raid. And as you may imagine if you watched the last video I made about this character is very raid item focused. This definitely is a more intense character to try to build, but if you want to play this without being raid item focused, picking up a couple Forester's brush hooks to focus on commas, or again, just picking a different centered 2-weapon fighting option could work as well. Although commas are not necessarily bad here, especially as I said, if you do happen to get your hand on Forester's brush hooks, which come from the Druid's Deep Chain. They're not super difficult to come by because you can pretty much always pick one up when you complete the chain reward. It's one of the older chains, which actually gives you some of the items from the chain reward, so you can pick that up, grab a couple of those for heroics, maybe a couple of those for epics, and you should be in the clear. Just a couple repeats and you're all set. Plus, they're bound to character on equip, meaning you can find them all in the auction house all the time. Heck, your friends might even have some banked away. So if this is a build you want to try, I would definitely recommend getting yourself some Forester's brush hooks for the leveling process. But as I said, you can pretty much level from 1 to 20, mostly as like just a sorcerer, and really focus on the other stuff later. Overall, I love this build. It is super duper fun, and I have been waiting a long time to share it with you guys because I really wanted to test it, get a feel for it, feel how good it really is. It's not super difficult to come by in terms of most of the gear, but it just happens to have like a lot of pieces out of Hunter Be Hunted. So I hope you like the Hunter Be Hunted raid, because if you want to get all the gear for this character, you're going to be running that one for a very long time. Now, without further ado, I'll pass it over to me with the build. I made a character build where I was like, you know what, Fire Sorcerer, double commas, really good. If you haven't seen it, you feel free to check out that video, but it turns out that video, garbage, useless, because I made a new build. Same build, almost, with Sorcerer, but we got Favorite Soul and we have Monk. So this is going to be a little bit of a lighter kind of touch here because it's a lot of the same stuff, almost exactly. So I'm going to touch on what has changed for the most part from pure Sorcerer to the Favorite Soul and Monk version. Basically, why do I take 1 level of Favorite Soul? Because 1 level of Favorite Soul gives me access to Divine Might, allowing me to apply half of my Charisma modifier, right here, to my hit chance, my damage, and my tactics DCs. Right now my Charisma is 84 because I foolishly got rid of all of my Sentient XP before I got my new artifact, so I can't put in all of my extra Charisma. My character would actually be jumping up to about, I think it ends at 97, or 96, sorry, once this character is done, which would give me a little bit more damage, but it's a lot of extra damage per hit, over 20 additional damage per hit, which is huge, and the extra tactic DCs, which is nice. And then the Monk. Why do you take Monk? Well, because I'm using commas, my character can get comma proficiency from Monk, so I don't need to spend the feat, so it gives me a feat back. Monk grants me a feat, because you get 1 bonus feat at level 1 of Monk, and it gives me access to the Way of Water stance, the Ocean stance. Now, unfortunately, I didn't get the many upgraded stances. I did get the Adaptive Forms. I took 1 level of it to improve the power of my Ocean stance, which gives me Wisdom, which I don't care too much about, but it's mostly that I get the extra dodge cap, so my character gets to stand around at a 27% dodge. In Elite difficulty, I'm missing buffs, that's why it's not capped. Or when I'm in Reaper mode, this goes up to 28, which is really nice. So, as I said, I'm missing a little bit of stats there, but for the most part, it's a lot of extra defense on top of the displacement, on top of the armor class, on top of the conceal or the incorporeality. So it kind of goes there. But that's not all. The second thing that Monk gets for me is out of the Henshin Mystic tree. First, 1 point in Henshin Mystic gives you a bonus Imbue dice. Since I'm playing as an Eldritch Knight and going all in on fire damage, extra Imbue dice is very important. So 1 point is really, really inexpensive. And I get this ability called All-Consuming Flame. It makes it so that my target takes 10% more damage from fire, which stacks with everything else that I do. So, let me go over why this combination is so deadly and dangerous. For starters, I get tons of Imbue dice out of the Eldritch Knight tree. So I get a whole bunch of Imbue there, so I get a lot of extra fire damage on hit through my Spellblade. I get to add fire damage on hit for every Imbue dice that I have. Very cool. Then, I can make the monster take 10% more fire damage, which amplifies my fire, but we're not done. I also get Improved Scorch, which makes monsters take 5% more fire damage, and if they're immune, they're no longer immune. But we're not done. Then I have this effect right here on Inferno's Demands, which is why this comma is important, for fire vulnerability. So monsters take 20% more fire damage whenever I hit them. Very good. And then finally, I have this effect, Mind Tear, which reduces monsters' magical resistance rating, which makes them take 21% more magical damage. So, all of these things are not additive either. They multiply together. So, starting from the top, I get 21% more damage, then I get 20% of 121%, which is, I don't know, 145-ish, 46-ish% damage. And then I get an extra 10% of that 146%. Each step multiplies the step before it, the step before it. That's the way it's designed. I don't know if it's supposed to be like that, but the end result is that when everything is said and done, my character alone increases the amount of fire damage a monster takes by 60 to 65%, just off the hop, somewhere in there. And then on top of that, anybody else can apply even more debuffs. Somebody else could apply the ooze effect for more damage increases. You could have a warlock, you could have somebody in the Shadow Dancer tree. Regular vulnerability stacks with this for an extra 20% damage on top of that. So the end result is, because I apply a lot of unique debuffs, this 10% fire, this fire 5% over here, and because nobody uses the commas except for pretty much this build, the fire vulnerability, if you have fire players in your party, like a fire warlock, a fire druid, a fire sorcerer, all of these characters will be very happy to have you in the party because you debuff things. And then for my own purposes, all of a sudden, my character's hitting for like 4,000 damage with my imbue dice every single time I click the mouse, which is pretty freaking sweet, because it does a lot of extra damage. So, as I said, quick and dirty, we'll go over the build, and so that's now you know why. So here's the decisions. All into charisma, some constitution, enough dexterity to be able to take all the 2-weapon fighting feats. You need that. As far as skills go, use magic device, spellcraft, concentration. You don't really need anything else. Just use magic device and spellcraft, essentially. Everything else doesn't really matter. I did put 1 point into tumble, so I can tumble around, because tumbling is fun. As far as the actual feats go, you need all the combat style feats, so the 2-weapon fighting the whole way through. I also took 2-weapon defense for extra magical resistance rating cap, just to take a little bit less damage from magic, which is nice. I also took deflect arrows I get deflect arrows for free. I took the meta magic feats, maximize and quicken. You have a fair amount of spell-like abilities on this character and other spells you can cast, so having maximize just gives you a little bit of extra damage when you do get those things in there. And additionally, I think that's it. Yeah, I took adept. I took the adept forms. But it's not too crazy. It's pretty straightforward. You take a lot of like the offensive feats as well. Martial feats. My character also took improved critical slashing and precision and swords of plowshares. Swords of plowshares is what you need to increase your critical threat range with commas to make them feel kind of okay. And then I have precision here as well to increase my hit chance as well as my fortification bypass, because you don't get any from your classes, basically. As far as the epic feats went, I grabbed the perfect 2-weapon fighting. This character is lawful because you have to be lawful to be a monk. So I took Embodiment of Law for +2 imbue dice. I also grabbed Double Strike and Arcane Warrior. Now, Arcane Warrior is something that gives you increased spell power when you attack and increased melee power when you cast spells. It's hard to keep both of these up, in theory. However, this character gets to easily do it by using the Primal Avatar tree using Shardstorm. This is a ability that when you cast it, it will then randomly strike out with these poison darts to monsters nearby you. Each attack with the poison dart counts as a spell cast because it's a full set of damage. It's not a damage over time. It's like, imagine you cast a spell and then each time you fire it, damages a monster, which gives you 1 stack of Arcane Warrior. As a result, you can easily be at max stacks of Arcane Warrior all the time while questing. I was just questing a whole bunch doing some R7s, and I never really had to worry about keeping my stacks up, getting lots of extra melee power. The spell power you're always going to have. And then perfect 2-weapon fighting and double strike, I don't really need to explain that too much. I do take Wellspring of Power because this button, whenever you press it, gives you a huge amount of increased damage. You just pop it off, and then the extra 150 spell power is major for all of your hits because you use Sonic spell power, you use Fire spell power and everything. It's just really, really nice. As far as the spells go, just a lot of utility, pretty much grabbing exclusively utility spells along the way, as well as Scorch. I like casting Delayed Blast Fireball semi-regularly, and then Hold Monster Mass. Hold Monster Mass is kind of the bread and butter of this character. Right now, when I'm actually buffed and in combat, I get up to 98 DCs currently. This will go up to 105 once I have all of my gear. And with Isle of Dread and other places, monsters tend to have lower will saves, so this works nearly all of the time. But for the rest of this, again, this is all just utility spells. Fire Shield for defense, Teleport because it's convenient and I'm lazy, Greater Heroism, Dispel Magic, stuff like that. You don't really need a lot of damage spells, although Delayed Blast Fireball is still useful through the entire leveling process. We already went over the enhancements a little bit, but to do a quick refresher, Tiefling for the fire immunity bypass, because it's pretty good. Vistani Knife Fighter, because action boost haste is the best attacks, like damage increase for a melee you can get in the whole game. So this is just huge for the damage, as well as 5% double strike here and quick draw. I need charisma to hit and damage, and this ability allows me to enchant my weapons so they never break, so I can just smash oozes whenever I feel like it. And then we got the War Soul for the trance. We got the Hench and Mystic for the All-Consuming Flame, and then Eldritch Knight because this is all of my damage here. I don't take the Action Boost Spell Power. I used to take this out of here, but obviously because I'm using this one, you can't use both Action Boosts at the same time. And as far as the Epic Destinies go, I am a Fate Singer with some Draconic Incarnation Primal Avatar. You can have way more points than this to spend in your tree, so you can be a little bit more flexible, but this is basically how I went through it. Picking up extra Imbue Dice out of Draconic Incarnation, picking up the Shared Mantle effect for the extra Imbue Dice in here, as well as the upgrade for Shard Storm to give me temporary hit points, which is very, very nice. A lot of strength. And then Fate Singer Tree, because the Sword Sings does a ton of damage, and it's very, very powerful. Grabbing Harmonic Resonance to increase the amount of damage the monsters take from Sonic and reduce their armor class, because my character does not have an armor class destruction effect, so it can be hard to get the right amount of hit chance. Right now, my character is at 136, or if I happen to use my in combat buff, 154, and then if I get other stuff, I go up to about 160 generally, which is not amazing. I'd like to get higher than that, but I'm kind of limited based on how many past lives and other things that I have. You can get more if you have more of them, and some more points. But around 160 was where I am. This character is not super heavily reliant on critical hits. You mostly just need to hit the target, but the critical hits are nice to have, and so getting this up would be cool. But I'm kind of limited as to where I am. Outside of that, picking up stuff like Rain for the extra Thunderclap damage, the reduced threat generated, which is nice because I do hit pretty hard. And then I have Very, Very Vocal for the extra duration on my Foundation or my Discord ability here, Blade of Discord. This ability works super well because the Trance gives you Tactics DCs. So even though I'm a Sorcerer and I don't get any bonus to stunning anywhere, my Trance will give me about 20 extra points of stunning, and then on top of that I get an item, plus I have a high charisma, so the DC on Blade of Discord is hovering around 105, 110, somewhere in there, which is pretty good. And then tier 5, you got Cut the Strings, which is just one of the best abilities in the entire video game. Just take this, press this, use this. If you don't know what this does, just go get it, put it on your character, press the button, and go, oh shit, that's the greatest thing ever. It's an instant kill, it's boss DPS, it's everything. Best ability ever designed, I love it. And then Turn the Tide. This is a full raid-wide party buff. I use this whenever there's basically a boss or anything scary to fight. For you, this is even better because it gives you dodge. You're in melee, you like that. Weapon damage, well, you're in melee, so you like weapon damage. And spell power. Spell power affects your, so the weapon damage affects your physical damage, and the spell power affects your imbue, so you use both of the effects at the same time. Very, very cool. Lastly, the gear. So this is going to be the hardest part. If you're watching this video, you need all the gear, so this is not like a negotiable. You could probably make another item set, but it is going to be way less effective. This is very tuned. So every piece fits together very, very well. I'm going to go through piece, set by set, so you kind of understand what is going on. So for starters, I'm using the Inferno's Desire and the Inferno's Demands, these two paired commas. That is the whole reason why we're a monk, and we're using commas, is because of this set. These increased fire damage taken by monsters by 41%, on top of the fact that you get Combustion, Insightful Combustion, as well as Insightful Evocation Focus, which is very hard to come by. This is a very good item set, and the set bonus that gives you Fire Spell Power and Fire Spell Crit. Unbelievably powerful, very good set. You need to get this. This comes from the raid Hunter Be Hunted, and you need both of them. So if you don't have these yet, just play regular Fire Sorcerer, maybe farm them out, and then get this build. It's really integral to the character itself. Next, we have the Part of the Family set. Comes from Sharn. Don't need a lot of explanation there. I'm currently using the Family's Blessing because it gives Double Strike and Insightful Armor Piercing. In a pinch, you could use the regular Part of the Family necklace instead of the raid piece, and then find an augment for Double Strike somewhere in your build. But that's a little bit harder to do because the augments are very tight. Also with, I'll go over the augments in a little bit here, and then the Hammer Fist you just kind of farm out from Sharn. Then we have the Mage Rite set to get my spell DCs up. My character can actually use enchantment spells because I have bonus to all spell DCs as well as artifact bonus to charisma here. So the goggles actually don't really do anything for me, so I don't even have them crafted. They don't matter. It's mostly the cloak, wizardry, enchantment focus, insightful enchantment focus, and quality charisma, as well as the set bonus is really, really good in this case. Then we have a few odds and ends. I have a two-piece set here with the Dire Bear Belt, great defensive, insightful sheltering, a bunch of armor, as well as the Deep Snow Boots, which gives you a bunch of extra constitution and freedom of movement, and as well the artifact bonus for 30 physical resistance rating, kind of shoring up the tank a little bit. Then we have the legendary Spinneret. This is the only item I can fit in the build that gets quality spell focus mastery, and it gives you quality potency, which is more fire spell power. So it's perfect. Love that. Then we have the Shattered Onyx, which gives profane spell focus, so 2 more DCs, as well as insightful charisma, and the insightful dodge and resistance actually matter, because even with a dodge augment, you still need more dodge to kind of max it out. And then we have the Dinosaur Bone Bracer. This is my artifact of choice. I went with this one just because it gives me Sacred Spell DCs, so it gives an extra +2 bonus to your spell DCs, which is pretty important. That stacks with the quality, the insightful, and everything else. And on top of that, this gives me Deception easily, so I can get the extra damage when I sneak attack targets. Important note, sneak attack is when you do not have aggro on a target. So you can sneak attack as long as you don't have aggro, and that happens all the time because I have threat reduction. So when I'm playing in a group, I usually don't have aggro on the monsters, so I get tons of extra damage against them thanks to my Deception. I also have the Executioner's Helm here because it gives Seeker, a stat I don't have, which is extra crit damage. Insightful Deception, more damage on crit, a stat I don't have. Quality Combat Mastery, more Tactics DCs, a stat I don't have. And Relentless Fury, which is if you get a kill, you now have 5% more damage, and it lasts for 30 seconds, which is really, really good. And then last but not least, I have this trinket. This is a crafted one. These are the stats I couldn't fit in the build that I needed to put. So I have here, these are also non-augmentable. So Insightful Seeker, so extra crit damage, armor piercing, so I can crit the monsters, and then spell saves. Because my saving throws are not perfect, and having an extra 11 to all of these whenever I go against a spell is very, very handy. Especially when I get spell buffs from other characters, plus, 6 saving throws from Bless, an extra 4 from Holy Aura, stuff like that. Now lastly, Augments. The augments are very important to this build as well, so I'm going to kind of go over them here. I have them all over the place. So we'll start with the weapons, and here I got Ruby of Adamantine Arms and Ruby of Good with my main hand. I would love to put in Adamantine Arms in the offhand, but it's a little expensive to have them in both, and I also need to get a Ruby of Sonic damage, so Resonance in here would be very good. Kind of help me out with that to give me extra spell power. But you want to be able to bypass Good and Adamantine damage whenever possible, because it's going to come up all the time. Spinneret, Diamond of Constitution. I can't fit Constitution in the build, so I use a augment for that. The boots, Armored Agility. I actually don't need Armored Agility anymore, so I can replace this entirely. Huh. Anyway, Epic Essence of the Litany of the Dead. This one is a little harder to come by. This is not essential to the build, but it helps. It basically gives you +2 bonus to all of your ability scores, and you get this by converting the Epic Litany of the Dead from the raid Mark of Death, and you crunch it down into an augment, and you put it into your gloves. So, very cool. Sapphire of Resistance, this can go up to 11, so I can get an extra +3 saves squeezed in if I want. Emerald of Arcane Empowerment. This gives you +1 Imbue dice. This does not stack with the filigree that comes from the Snow Peaks. The Snow Peaks filigree set does not stack with this, so keep that in mind. I don't know if that's a bug or not, but it doesn't. But either way, this one you have to get from the Hunter Be Hunted raid. A lot of things are going to come out of Hunter Be Hunted here. Then the Mage Knight's Cloak, I have a Sapphire Defense here, so it gives me +36 to all of my my physical and magical resistance rating, because I do not have a magic resistance rating item in this build. The empty yellow augment slot, I'm supposed to put in Evocation augment from Isle of Dread here for +6 Evocation DCs. I don't have that yet. I already went through this. Yellow augment of melee power and blue augment of dodge. That's just straightforward. Melee power gives you more damage. Dodge gives you more dodge. Couldn't fit that in. Topaz of Greater Enchantment. So there are topazes you can buy from Giant Hold, the level 24 Giant Hold vendor, that will allow you to get +2 to a spell DC. It is an enhancement bonus, so it actually stacks. So that's where I have this one. Actually, I bought this one from the DDO store because I didn't have any of the ingredients to buy it myself, so I bought it from the DDO store. But anyway, that's what you can do with that. Here, I have the Sapphire Protection +10, and I'm missing an item called Pomora's Memento, or the Essence of Pomora's Memento. There's a ring from Hunter Be Hunted, again, another Hunter Be Hunted item, that gives you bonuses to all of your spell crit chance. You can turn it into an augment that just has the spell crit chance bonus and then put it in here. It would give me an extra 6%, I think, crit, or 5% crit with all of my spells, which is quite good. Sapphire of Accuracy, I couldn't fit accuracy anywhere in the build, so it gives me +20 accuracy here. In my Dinosaur Bone Bracers, I have a Exceptional Charisma 1 and a Festive Charisma 2, so that's not too bad here. And then the missing augment that I would like to put in here is the Wraithborn Emerald, which you get from Isle of Dread. I just don't happen to have one, so I'm going to keep farming until I eventually get one to add it into the build here. And the last thing we're going to talk about is the filigrees. So The current setup that I'm using is I have the Sanctified Fervor Filigree here, and I currently go for the 4-piece Sanctified Fervor because it gives melee power and double strike, getting 3 pieces here, using the Rare for Sanctified Fervor and Reverberation, as well as the melee power Rare and the Charisma here, and then in my artifact here, also using the second copy of the same Filigree, so it's another Sanctified Fervor Reverberation. Because I have one in my weapon and one in my artifact, I can use both of them at the same time, giving me 2 imbue dice, the healing amp, and all that other stuff, so it's pretty good. On top of that, this character is also running the same thing, to hell and back, which is +2 charisma, and I've got a second to hell and back here. I just can't put it in because I'm a moron and I didn't level up my artifact. And then I would have a 3-piece to hell and back set because it gives the extra magical resistance rating and the charisma. However, I'm going to be changing this up, but I'll talk about that in a second. I'm using the Wreath of Flame 4-piece set because it gives you permanent fire shield, so you take half from cold all the time. As a low magic resistance rating character, taking half from cold is kind of cool. And it gives you Fire Mastery for 50 spell power and +1 imbue dice. That might not seem that good because you have to use 4 of your filigrees to get +1 imbue. But remember, you also get 50 fire spell power. And fire spell power amps up all of your damage, and more spell power is better. Now, the big change that I would make here is I have Reverberation here for the extra sonic spell power. Cut Reverberation, cut out these 2 Sanctified Fervor, and my plan instead is to run the 4-piece Autos Filigree set, Autos Irrevocable Power. What that does is it allows me to pick up a little bit of extra spell points, but most importantly, +2 to spell DCs and some more charisma. That's kind of what I'm missing here. But before I can run that, I need to unlock the rest of the slots on my artifact, and I'm an idiot, and I don't have any items to shove in here yet. But I'm going to farm that out and get that done. So that is the full explanation of the character. Hopefully, if you want to try to build this character, you understand why I made the decisions that I made, and you can kind of do it yourself. It's really fun. The damage is super high. I would estimate well, maybe not the highest in the game, but it's going to be anywhere from like 26 to 30,000 damage, somewhere in there, depending. That was my last testing that I did. Somewhere around there, 26 to 30,000 damage per second is the general experience when you actually get to melee the monsters. And that is, with all the buffs and everything else. Once you get things going in, and when you have other people actually helping you, so that is people applying vulnerability, people applying dust stacks, ooze, and other effects of maybe if a warlock debuffing the boss, now you might have even more damage. But overall, it's pretty good, and I have a lot of fun with this character. So those are the updates. This is how I would change this character post imbue. If you like what you saw, please like the channel. And yes, I apologize that there's no version that is less intense gear-wise. It is what it is. This is what an endgame build looks like, and sometimes I do those. So, yeah. Important note, this is also not the most gear-intensive version. I could probably try to fit in a better item called the legendary Red Dragon Scale Armor, and that would give me even more damage, but getting the armor is annoying, which is why I don't have it. And also, if I did, it would make the gearing like an absolute nightmare, because I'd have to figure out how to get all the set bonuses in without using the part of the family set, but I still want all these other things, and I basically need to get like 3 or 4 augment sets, and I don't have the patience to do that. So that's all I have. So thank you for watching. Have a wonderful time, and like and subscribe or something.